All right, hello there, thrill seekers. I was going to do a video today, but Ziggy over here is sick. I don't know what's up with him. He had some bad poop problems last night, and what time is it now? It's almost 11 o'clock in the morning, and he still hasn't wanted to eat breakfast. And I keep saying, food, Ziggy, which is one of the words that usually gets him very excited. And as you can see, the word food, Ziggy, he's not even responding. So I'm a little worried. So I'm not going to make a video today. I'm going to see what I can do for Ziggy. I did want to point out a couple of things about yesterday's video, which is that somebody put a link to a video in which a Tibetan person explains the Dalai Lama's actions and says that sticking out your tongue and this specific way of teasing children by old men is a kind of a common thing in Tibetan culture. I don't know. That's what he says, and I linked it in the video description of yesterday's video. Retroactively, I put it in this morning, and so it's in the link. It's in the video description of the video Kiss the Dalai Lama, and I'll put it also in the video description for this video in case you want to go look at his explanation and see what that guy has to say about it. Also, he kind of confirms my suspicions that the reason for this video suddenly circulating after a month or two is probably related to the Chinese being upset about something that the Dalai Lama was doing in Mongolia, and I really don't follow all that stuff. It's kind of some political thing that the Dalai Lama did that the Chinese government were upset about, and now they're seeking to discredit the Dalai Lama by releasing this video and so on and so forth, which I think is interesting. And some people were upset that I said the Dalai Lama doesn't know anything about Buddhism. I think intellectually, I think this Dalai Lama has probably studied a heck of a lot about Buddhism, and probably he knows a lot about Buddhism, probably knows more about Buddhism than me in terms of intellectual study and kind of knowing stuff about Buddhism. This is a very complicated question that I probably should do a whole 20-minute video on. There are people who I feel have a kind of something, and there are very, very few of them in this world. And I was lucky enough to meet two of those people, maybe three, maybe I could count four. Gudo Nishijima obviously being one of them, Tim McCarthy being one of them, possibly Mel Weitzman, although I only met him I think 2 times, but I felt something coming from him, possibly Zuiko Redding, but I haven't really hung around with her enough to really feel it, but and then Nisargadatta Maharaj in print, Shunryu Suzuki, Kobun Chino, Dainin Katagiri. A handful of people really have something. And I just don't count the Dalai Lama among those people. I'm sorry to disappoint people who want me to count the Dalai Lama among those people. Maybe you do. And if you do, that's great. I don't. That's what I mean when I say saying he doesn't know anything about Buddhism is probably the wrong way to put it. He doesn't have a spark for me that it's nothing I can really, it's not interesting to me what he has to say about Buddhism. That's what I mean. But as I say, I'm probably not expressing it very well. Anyway, what I'm going to do instead of making a video today is show you a bit of a video from a talk I gave at Benediktushof, which is a meditation center in Germany, and this is from September 10th of 2022. And it's just the beginning of a talk I gave, mostly me reading from my book, The Other Side of Nothing, but I think the reading in front of an audience is a bit different from you reading it by yourself at home out of a book. So it might be worth it. And anyway, here's the video, and I hope you enjoy. And you can also donate to me at the URL hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. That's how I make my living, and I really appreciate those donations. But this is offered for free, so you don't got to donate if you don't want to donate. Anyway, here's the video. So let's go, and I'm going to take care of my little Ziggy guy. See ya. When I was in Finland a week ago, someone talked about a speech by Shohaku Okumura, who's a Zen teacher, a Japanese Zen teacher who lives in America, and he comes to Sweden, I think almost every year, and they had gone, these Finnish people had gone to see him in Sweden. And someone asked Okumura Roshi to explain the meaning of the Heart Sutra. And this Finnish guy had said, he's expected to hear this long speech about the meaning of the Heart Sutra. And Shohaku Okumura had said, that's easy. The meaning of the Heart Sutra is, there is no operator. The end. So I wanted to talk about there is no operator, because I've been thinking about that ever since I heard that. And so I thought I would read to you the final chapter, spoiler alert, of my new book. Actually, it's not the final chapter. The way I wrote this book, I have a final chapter, and then I have 2 chapters that come after the final chapter. And so anyway, if you read the book, you'll kind of understand why that is. There's a reason for it. But this is the actual final chapter. Then there's 2 chapters that come after the final chapter. So this is the spoiler alert. This is who done it. So you'll know who killed the guy now when you hear this, and then you won't have to buy the book, so you'll save yourself 20 euros. So this will be good for you. Okay, so I'll just read this to you, and then we'll talk about it, because it's very short. Before I let you go, I need to say a few more things about the matter of choice. The best place to start is with the opening lines of an old Chinese poem called Inscription on Faith in Mind by Zen Master So-san. The great way is not difficult. Just avoid picking and choosing. And I would love to know where that translation comes from, because that's the translation that's been stuck in my brain for I don't know how many years. And maybe I just made it up, because I could never find that exact wording anywhere else. There are a lot of different translations of the first 2 lines. I honestly don't know who is responsible for the version above, which is my favorite. D.T. Suzuki's version says, "The perfect way knows no difficulties except that it refuses to make preferences." Philippe Coupet translates it as, "Entering the way is not difficult, but you must have no love or hate, or choose or reject." In case you care, the Chinese characters are, and then I printed those out in the book. If you ask me for a literal translation of the Chinese characters, it would be, perfect way, not difficult, just hate picking, choosing. The poem goes on. When like and dislike are absent, everything becomes perfectly clear. But if there's the slightest bit of distinction, heaven and earth are infinitely distant. To set what you like against what you dislike is a disease of the mind, says the poem. When you grasp or reject, the truth is hidden. Later the poem says, if you stop speaking and thinking, there is nothing you cannot understand. The poem also says, with one mind there is no arising, then everything is without blame. In Eihei Koroku Dharma Hall Discourse number 371, Dogen says,
The third ancestor, great teacher Janji Senkan, aka Sosan, so that this is one of these cases where the Japanese pronounce the names differently than the Chinese, in Inscription on Faith in Mind, said, "The supreme way is not difficult, only disdain picking and choosing. Great assembly, have you ever studied the third ancestor's meaning? Tell me, what is the third ancestor's meaning? Passing through 3 kalpas," again, kalpa is a really, really, really long time, "without fail we arrive. Passing through numberless kalpas, without fail we arrive. Without arising from our seat, without fail we arrive. Without arising in a single moment, without fail we arrive. Therefore, the third ancestor said, the supreme way is not difficult. Simply to disdain picking and choosing is like a Garuda not eating anything but dragons. As you may recall, because I mentioned this earlier in the book, a Garuda is a mythical kind of bird god that eats nothing but dragons. In their footnotes to their translation of this discourse, Taigen Dan Leighton and Shohaku Okumura write, Dogen is pointing out a paradox in the Inscription on Faith in Mind. Disdaining or avoiding is a kind of preference, a kind of picking and choosing. But for Garudas, it is simply natural to eat dragons. For Buddhist practitioners, it is simply natural to follow the way. Okay. In Dharma Hall Discourse number 472, Dogen says, the third ancestor, great teacher Jiangji Senkan, again this is Sosan, said, the supreme way is not difficult, simply dislike picking and choosing. It's funny, people even translate it differently in the same book. Upon hearing this, people who do not understand might say, all dharmas are without good and bad. Every action is neither evil nor upright. Simply trust your nature and stroll along. Following conditions, let go of everything. Therefore, with all good and bad, or evil and upright, do not pick or choose, but just go on your way. Another may say, in order to not do this so-called picking or choosing, do not speak using words. This can be done by simply making a circle, holding up a whisk, pounding a monk's staff, boom, throwing down a staff, clapping hands, giving a yell, holding up a sitting cushion, or raising a fist. And Dogen says, views like this do not depart from the cave of common beings. Suppose someone were to ask me, Eihei, he's calling himself, what is the point of simply dislike picking and choosing? I would say to him, a Garuda does not eat anything but raw dragons. The Bodhisattva next in line for Buddhahood, i.e. Maitreya, the Buddha who's supposed to come next, is not born except in Tushita heaven. And I think the store here is called Tushita, or I saw a bag saying Tushita, is that right? Okay. Maitreya is the name of the Maitreya is the name of the person who Gautama Buddha, there's a typo here, it should say Gautama Buddha, not the Gautama Buddha, supposedly predicted would be the next Buddha after him. Tushita heaven is one of the many heavenly realms in traditional Buddhist cosmology. It's supposed to be a realm of meditative bliss. Dogen liked alluding to mythology to make his points. It makes him hard to understand sometimes. Let me see if I can find a way to say the same thing without referencing ancient myths. We all like to think that we have the power to choose what to do or what not to do. The very fact that the Buddhist precepts exist at all, and this whole book has been about the Buddhist precepts, would seem to argue for the idea that we have free will. Otherwise, why would there be a precept, for example, against stealing? If we have no choice whether to steal or not to steal, why ask us to vow not to steal? Dogen seems to be arguing that, like the mythical Garuda bird, we are programmed by nature. If we are programmed by nature to eat dragons, then we have no choice but to eat dragons. I like that the second time he uses this metaphor, he has the guard as not just eating dragons, but eating them raw. On the other hand, Dogen also criticizes the idea that avoid preferences means just to let go of everything and stroll along your merry way. He says that making nonsensical gestures as a way to avoid explaining what this means is a cop-out too. On the other hand, as the footnote says, avoiding preferences is another sort of preference, but I have an answer for that one. I once asked my first Zen teacher about the criticism that having no goal in your Zazen practice is a kind of goal, the goal of having no goal. He said that this makes sense semantically, like in terms of words, but, he said, in actual practice, the goal of having no goal, if we want to call it that, is very different from having a goal in the usual sense. Having a preference for avoiding preferences is not the same as other preferences. Let me back up here a little. When Buddhists talk about preferences, they're not talking about things like preferring strawberry ice cream over vanilla. They're not talking about how I preferred the sound of the Ibanez Black Eagle bass I used to have over any other bass I ever owned and how much I regret selling it. Those sorts of things are related to the Buddhist Those sorts of things are related to the Buddhist view of preference tangentially. When Buddhists talk about preferences, they're talking about the way we often imagine that our lives could be different from how they actually are. They're talking about the way we imagine that we have any real choice over what life presents us, or even much of a choice when it comes to how we respond to what life presents us. The question I ask myself when it comes to the matter of having preferences is this: is any action truly my action? The inscription of Faith in Mind also contains the lines, "The doer vanishes along with the deed. The deed disappears when the doer is annihilated. The deed has no function apart from the doer. The doer has no function apart from the deed." Doing and doer are one and the same. You are not an individual who does stuff. Doing stuff happens, but you don't do anything. Think about it this way. You probably imagine you had a choice when it came to reading this book or not reading it. But did you? The fact that you felt interested enough to get this far into it can be traced to a long line of events in which you had no agency. But let's take the heat off you and put it on to me. I'll ask myself right now, why did I read Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, the very first book I ever read about Zen? Well, I was exposed to Hindu religious iconography and beliefs when I was a child because my dad took a job in Nairobi where there is a large Indian population. I had no choice in moving to Africa when I was a child. The fact that a terrible genetic disorder runs in my family made me very anxious about matters of life and death at an early age, and I certainly had no choice in that. I did choose to sign up for a course at Kent State University called Zen Buddhism, in which the book was required reading, but if the folks who ran KSU, Kent State University, hadn't offered that course, I couldn't have chosen it. If I extrapolate from this, I see that my personality is made up of all sorts of things that I had no agency in choosing. Calling it my personality doesn't seem right. Who am I to say I own or control this personality? If I keep in mind how little choice I had in anything about myself, it's hard to feel shame or guilt about what I've done in the past. More significant than that is that if I remember that other people, More significant than that, though, is that if I remember that other people had little or even no real choice in their actions, it's hard to feel animosity or hatred toward anyone else. That is not to say that I never feel shame or even hatred. I do. But the understanding that such feelings have no rational basis is very freeing. Of course, the other side is also true. I can't really be proud of myself or my accomplishments either. I can be impressed by the accomplishments of other people, but I can't feel very much envy toward them. Or if I do happen to feel envy, I can be very certain that my feelings of envy have no rational basis either. All sorts of things pop up when you try to talk about ideas like these. The most simplistic ones are usually along the lines of something like, do you mean serial killers shouldn't be held accountable for their atrocities? People always jump to stuff like that. And no, this doesn't mean that serial killers shouldn't be held accountable. Nor does it mean that you and I won't be held accountable for the things we do. That's an entirely different matter. What it means is that dragons don't need to hate Garudas for eating them raw. Maybe the reason Dogen liked to phrase things in terms of myth was to stay out of pointless discussions and arguments. A Garuda's job is to eat dragons. Therefore, dragons would do well to avoid hanging out where Garudas hang out. A Garuda might say she prefers to eat dragons as opposed to, say, eating Lucky Charms cereal. That's a sweet kid's cereal that I happen to like. But she has no choice in the matter. But she has no real choice in the matter. It's just the way she was created. Eating dragons is her role to play in the mythological ecosystem. Still, whatever karma comes to a Garuda for eating a dragon is exactly what it is. Remember that Dogen didn't think much of the interpretation, all dharmas are without good and bad, and every action is neither evil nor upright. Therefore, with all good and bad, or evil and upright, do not pick and choose, but go on your way. That's what he didn't like. This is why part of the Buddhist way is to follow the precepts as best we can. We don't ignore the fact that all actions have consequences, nor do we abdicate responsibility for what we have done. We don't just do whatever we feel like doing. We try to understand what the universe needs us to do and do only that. Since it is very difficult to understand what the universe needs us to do with the thinking mind, we do Zazen so that we are more able to follow our deeper intuitive sense. Now you know the end of the book, and you don't have to buy the book.
I bought it already.
Oh, I'm sorry. Now I ruined the book for you. I spoiled the whole thing. I told you the ending. It was the cow that did it.